From the moment we take our first steps, we're taught the importance of walking together. We learn to follow rules, to imitate those who came before us, to respect traditions, and to repeat ideas we might not fully understand. It's almost as if belonging is woven into our very nature, a silent reward that brings the comfort of acceptance and the warmth of being part of something larger than ourselves. In this way, the herd isn't just a metaphor. It's a living, breathing reality that shapes our psychology and our society. It offers us direction, meaning, and recognition, wrapping us in a sense of safety that feels almost instinctive. But there's a tension that quietly grows beneath this comfort. The more we adapt, the more we're praised, and the more we're encouraged to fit in. Yet in this process, something essential can be lost. The safety of conformity is real, but so is the risk that comes with it. The risk of losing our ability to think freely, to question, to step outside the lines drawn for us. Independent thought becomes not just a challenge, but a necessity for anyone who wants to live authentically. So as we settle into the comfort of belonging, it's worth asking, what is the true cost of this safety? And what dangers might be hiding just beneath the surface of our need to fit in? As we move forward, let's look more closely at the hidden price we pay for the comfort of the herd and what it means for our courage and our freedom. Think back to your earliest memories of school, family gatherings, or even code playground games. How often were you praised for standing out, for questioning the rules, for daring to be different? More likely, you were rewarded for fitting in, for following instructions, for blending seamlessly into the group. Society, in its subtle and not so subtle ways, teaches us that adaptation is a virtue. The child who listens, who imitates, who doesn't make waves is the one who receives approval. The adult who follows the script, who doesn't challenge the status quo, is the one who is trusted and welcomed. It's not courage or authenticity that's celebrated, but the ability to mold ourselves to the expectations of those around us. This isn't just a cultural quirk, it's a deep psychological mechanism. Belonging feels good because it taps into something ancient within us. When we're accepted, our brains reward us with a sense of security, a feeling of being anchored in a world that can otherwise feel unpredictable and overwhelming. The approval of the group acts almost like a balm, soothing our anxieties and giving us a sense of purpose. We crave that nod of recognition, that silent agreement that we're doing things right, that we're one of us and not one of them. It's a powerful force, and it shapes our choices in ways we often don't even notice. But why is this instinct so strong? The answer lies in our evolutionary past. For most of human history, survival depended on the group. To be cast out was to face the dangers of the wild alone, with little hope of making it. The herd instinct, then, is not just a social habit, it's a survival strategy encoded in our DNA. Our ancestors who adapted, who followed, who didn't challenge the group, were the ones who lived long enough to pass on their genes. Over the generations, this instinct became a cornerstone of our psychology. Even today, in a world where physical survival rarely depends on the tribe, the emotional need to belong remains just as potent. So we learn to adapt. We learn to silence our doubts, to suppress our questions, to trade our individuality for the comfort of acceptance. And the more we do this, the more we're rewarded, not just with approval, but with the deep, almost primal sense of safety that comes from being part of something larger than ourselves. Yet, as reassuring as this safety may be, it comes at a price. Nature, in its wisdom, saw the profound risk hidden within this instinct. Because when belonging becomes more important than truth, when adaptation is valued over authenticity, we begin to lose something essential. The very thing that once protected us can become the very thing that holds us back. And so as we continue, let's look more closely at the cost of this safety and the dangers that arise when the herd instinct goes unquestioned. When we talk about the comfort of belonging, it's easy to overlook the price we pay for that comfort. The herd, in exchange for its protection and approval, asks for something in return. It asks for our silence when we see something wrong, for our conformity when we sense injustice, and for our neutrality when the moment calls for conviction. These aren't always explicit demands. Often, they're woven into the fabric of daily life, unspoken but deeply understood. We learn, sometimes painfully, that speaking out can mean isolation, that questioning the group can lead to suspicion, and that standing alone can feel like standing against the world. This pressure to remain silent, to go along, to keep our heads down, is more than just a social expectation. It's a psychological burden. Every time we swallow our words, every time we nod along with something we don't believe, a small part of us is chipped away. Over time, the cost accumulates. We begin to doubt our own perceptions, to second-guess our instincts, to wonder if our discomfort is just a sign that we're not trying hard enough to fit in. The desire to be accepted becomes so strong that we start to betray ourselves little by little in the name of peace. But this peace is fragile. It's built on the suppression of our own voice, on the quiet resignation that comes from choosing comfort over truth. The herd rewards us for this, for not making waves, for not challenging the order of things. Yet deep down, we feel the toll it takes, the resentment that simmers beneath the surface, the sense of unease that never quite goes away, the quiet exhaustion of living according to voices that aren't our own. The cost of safety, then, is not just the loss of our individuality, but the slow erosion of our spirit. And here's where the real danger lies. It's not just the external pressure to conform, but the way these demands become internalized. We start to police ourselves, to silence our own doubts before anyone else can. The herd's expectations become our own, and the boundaries of what we can say, think, or feel grow tighter and tighter. This is the hidden cost of safety, a cost that, if left unchecked, can leave us feeling empty, disconnected, and unable to remember what it was like to truly speak our minds. But the story doesn't end here, because the most profound prison is not built by others, but by the walls we build within ourselves. And it's this internalization of the herd's demands that we need to examine next. As we look deeper into the cost of belonging, we find that the most powerful chains are not the ones placed on us by others, but the ones we forge for ourselves. Guilt and internalized morality become the silent wardens of our inner world, shaping our thoughts and actions long after the herd has stopped watching. It's not just that we fear the judgment of others. We begin to judge ourselves, to anticipate disapproval, to feel shame for even considering a path that strays from what we've been taught. This is how the herd's demands become invisible rules, enforced not by society, but by our own conscience. But what is conscience, really? There's a crucial difference between an authentic conscience, one that arises from our own reflection, our own hard-won understanding of right and wrong, and a conditioned response, which is simply the echo of someone else's voice inside our heads. Authentic conscience is alive, responsive, and deeply personal. It's the result of wrestling with difficult questions, of making mistakes and learning from them, of choosing our values with open eyes. Conditioned morality, on the other hand, is automatic. It's inherited, absorbed, and rarely questioned. It tells us what to do, not because we believe it, but because we've been told it's the only way to be good. This is where guilt becomes a tool of control. When we internalize the herd's morality, guilt is no longer a sign that we've done something wrong by our own standards. Instead, it becomes a reflex, a way to keep ourselves in line, to prevent any movement beyond the boundaries set for us. We feel guilty not for betraying our own values, but for even thinking about stepping outside the norm. The fear of letting down family, community, tradition, or faith becomes so strong that it paralyzes us before we can even act. Guilt in this sense isn't about genuine remorse. It's about maintaining the status quo, about keeping us safely within the lines drawn by others. And so, the prison grows tighter. Most people never choose their values authentically. They inherit them, absorb them, and carry them as if they were sacred and untouchable. The result is a kind of moral paralysis where thought itself is restricted, where the boundaries of what's possible are set not by reality, but by the invisible walls of guilt and conditioning. This is one of the greatest obstacles for anyone who begins to wake up, who starts to see that the rules they've lived by were never truly their own. The first barrier isn't the world outside. It's the feeling of betraying something inside, the weight of guilt that keeps us from moving forward. But this internal prison doesn't exist in isolation. It's reinforced every day by the language we use, by the words we repeat, by the collective vocabulary that shapes not just our thoughts, but our very sense of what's real and possible. And it's to this subtle, yet powerful force of language that we now turn our attention. If you listen closely to the way people talk, you'll notice something curious. The words we use to describe what's good, what's just, what's worthy. These words are often handed down, repeated, and rarely examined. Collective language doesn't just shape our thoughts, it shapes our feelings, our perceptions, even the way we experience reality itself. When everyone around us uses the same phrases, the same slogans, the same moral vocabulary, it becomes almost impossible to see the world any other way. The language of the herd is like a current carrying us along, making it easier to drift than to swim against it. But there's a hollowness at the heart of this language. Words like respect, justice, kindness, and virtue are spoken so often that they begin to lose their meaning. They become badges of belonging, tokens we exchange to show we're part of the group. The more we repeat them, the less we feel them. And when someone dares to question what these words really mean, when someone tries to dig beneath the surface, the reaction is swift and often harsh. Dissenting voices are silenced, not always by argument, but by outrage, by the accusation that to question is to threaten the very fabric of the community. This is how the herd maintains its artificial peace. It's not a peace born of understanding or genuine harmony, but a peace built on repetition and the avoidance of discomfort. The language we inherit becomes a shield, protecting us from the friction of reality, from the unsettling questions that might force us to rethink what we've always believed. In this way, collective language doesn't just describe the world, it limits it. It defines what's acceptable to feel, to say, to even imagine. Yet for those who begin to see through this, the first step isn't always a loud act of rebellion. More often, it's a new kind of silence, a quiet withdrawal from the worn-out phrases, a refusal to keep speaking words that no longer ring true. And it's in this silence that the journey toward authenticity truly begins. When someone finally steps away from the language and expectations of the herd, what follows isn't the triumphant solitude we often see in stories or movies. It's not the peaceful retreat of a wise sage on a mountaintop, nor the glamorous independence of a lone hero. The solitude of authenticity is raw, and it's often painful. It's the kind of loneliness that settles in not because you've chosen to be apart, but because you can no longer pretend to belong. You find yourself surrounded by people, yet feeling invisible. You hear voices all around you, but none of them seem to reach you. Even when you're seen, you don't feel recognized for who you truly are. This solitude is not romantic. It's the ache of leaving behind the certainties that once gave your life structure. The words, the rituals, the shared beliefs, they all lose their power, and what's left is a kind of emptiness. There's no new community waiting to welcome you, no ready-made path to follow. Instead, you're left in a space where the ground feels unstable, where every step forward is a risk, and where the temptation to return to the comfort of the herd is always present. The pain isn't just about being alone. It's about losing the sense of belonging that once anchored you. It's about facing the judgment, the strange looks, the quiet withdrawal of those who once called you a friend or a brother. Yet as difficult as this solitude is, it's also the necessary ground for something new to grow. It's in this space, stripped of old certainties, exposed to the winds of doubt and longing, that a different kind of clarity can begin to emerge. The solitude of authenticity, though harsh, is the soil in which true self-understanding and genuine freedom can finally take root. And from this place, the journey continues, moving us toward a deeper confrontation with the world and with ourselves. When someone steps away from the herd, the reaction they face is rarely physical aggression. Instead, it's a subtler, more insidious kind of hostility. The herd responds not with open violence, but with accusation, exclusion, and the quiet, persistent effort to discredit. Suddenly, the person who once belonged is seen as a threat, not because they've done harm, but because their very existence challenges the established order. The good people, those who pride themselves on their virtue and decency, are often the first to turn away. Their approval, once so freely given, is now withheld. Their words, once warm, become cold or even cutting. The break is not just social, it's moral. The one who leaves is painted as arrogant, ungrateful, or even dangerous, simply for daring to live by their own light. This reaction reveals something important about the nature of collective goodness. It's far more fragile than it appears. The morality of the herd depends on constant affirmation, on the reassurance that everyone is still playing by the same rules. When someone steps outside, it exposes the possibility that those rules might not be as universal or as noble as everyone wants to believe. The presence of an independent thinker is unsettling because it forces the group to confront its own doubts, its own compromises, its own hidden resentments. Rather than face these uncomfortable truths, the herd turns its discomfort outward, directing it at the one who has broken away. At the heart of this hostility is a deep moral resentment. It's the bitterness of those who never found the courage to live by their own convictions, who settled for acceptance instead of authenticity. Seeing someone else do what they could not is a painful reminder of their own unfulfilled potential. The pain of being misunderstood, of being rejected by those who once called you friend, is real. It cuts deep, not just because of the loss, but because of the realization that the bonds of the herd were always conditional, dependent on your willingness to conform. Yet in the face of this hostility, something unexpected can happen. The awakened individual discovers the power of silence, not the silence of submission, but the silence that comes from strength, from clarity, from the refusal to keep justifying a life that no longer fits within the herd's narrow boundaries. And it's in this silence that a new kind of freedom begins to take shape. There's a moment after the accusations and the exclusion when silence takes on a new meaning. At first, silence might have been a sign of submission, a way to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to hide your true thoughts. But now it transforms. It becomes a form of strength, a quiet declaration that you no longer need to explain yourself to those who refuse to understand. This silence isn't empty or weak. It's full of presence, of intention, of self-respect. It's the silence of someone who has realized that no amount of words will ever be enough for those who are unwilling to listen, and that the constant effort to be accepted is often just a subtle form of self-betrayal. In this new silence, there's a kind of self-protection, but also a deep integrity. You're no longer burning your own light trying to illuminate places that refuse to see. Instead, you're conserving your energy, holding your truth close, refusing to let it be diluted by misunderstanding or hostility. This silence is unsettling to the herd because it disrupts the flow of automatic responses. It creates a space where the usual scripts no longer apply. It's a silence that doesn't beg for approval or react to provocation. It simply is, a calm refusal to participate in the old games. And it's from this silence that a deeper freedom begins to grow. No longer defined by reaction, you're free to move beyond mere refusal. You're ready to create, to build something new, not in opposition to the herd, but in affirmation of your own truth. This is where the journey shifts from breaking away to actively shaping a new way of being. Once silence has cleared the space, something remarkable becomes possible. The journey is no longer just about saying no to the herd, but about discovering what you can say yes to. This is the heart of what philosophers call transvaluation, the process of replacing inherited values with those that are born from your own experience, your own awareness, your own honest encounter with reality. It's not enough to reject what you've been given. True freedom means taking on the responsibility of creating a new way of living, one that is rooted in your own truth rather than the expectations of others. But this act of creation is not easy. It's risky, even frightening, because there's no longer a ready-made path to follow. Every choice becomes a statement, every action a reflection of what you truly believe. There's no one left to tell you what's right or wrong. You have to build that foundation yourself, brick by brick, through trial and error, through moments of doubt and flashes of insight. The responsibility is immense, because now you're accountable not just to the rules of the group, but to the deeper demands of your own conscience. And with that responsibility comes a new kind of risk, the risk of making mistakes, of being misunderstood, of standing alone in your convictions. Yet this is where real freedom lives. It's not just the absence of constraint, but the presence of creation. It's the courage to shape your own values, to live by them even when no one else understands, to let your actions become the quiet evidence of a life built from within. This is not a loud revolution, but a steady daily act of building something new. And while this creative process is liberating, it's not without its dangers. The very solitude that makes it possible can, if left unchecked, turn into isolation, a kind of exile from the world you once knew. So as we move forward, it's important to recognize both the promise and the peril of this path. Solitude, as powerful as it is, carries its own dangers. If you linger too long in isolation, it can start to twist into something darker. Bitterness, resentment, even a sense of exile from the world you once knew. The very clarity that solitude brings can become a burden if it's not balanced with connection and openness. There's a real risk of losing touch, of letting your independence harden into pride, or your insight turn into cynicism. It's easy to mistake the passage through solitude for a final destination, to believe that being alone is the only way to stay true to yourself. But solitude was never meant to be a permanent home. It's a necessary passage, a time for rebuilding, for listening deeply to your own voice, for discovering what truly matters to you. It's in this quiet space that you can let go of old certainties and begin to shape a new foundation. The goal isn't to remain apart forever, but to emerge from solitude with a renewed sense of self, ready to engage with the world from a place of strength and authenticity. And it's out of this passage, out of the silence and the struggle, that a new kind of strength and presence begins to emerge. One that is grounded not in the approval of others, but in the clarity you've found within yourself. Out of the solitude, out of the struggle to create new values and live by them, a new kind of person begins to emerge. This is the figure that Nietzsche called the overman, or Übermensch, not a superhuman in the sense of power or dominance, but someone who has transcended the need for the herd's approval and become their own guide. The overman is marked by a quiet serenity, a self-sufficiency that doesn't depend on applause or recognition. There's a calmness in their presence, a sense that they are grounded in something deeper than the shifting opinions of the crowd. What sets this individual apart is not arrogance or distance, but a profound loyalty to their own truth. They don't seek to dominate others or to prove their difference. Instead, they simply live in accordance with the values they have forged through solitude and self-examination. Their actions are deliberate, their words are few, and their need for validation has faded away. This isn't an unattainable ideal reserved for a chosen few. It's a real possibility for anyone willing to endure the discomfort of breaking away, to face the loneliness of authenticity, and to persist in the creation of a life that is truly their own. The journey, then, is not about contempt for others or withdrawal from the world. It's about a deep loyalty to oneself, a commitment to live honestly, to walk with integrity, and to let your presence become a quiet challenge to the world's expectations. And from this new center of gravity, the path forward becomes not just possible, but inevitable. In the end, as we look back on this journey, we see that true belonging isn't found in the applause of the crowd or the comfort of fitting in. It's found in the integrity that comes from living honestly, from the courage to walk alone, and from the quiet strength of being fully present in the world. No longer needing permission to be yourself, but simply being with open eyes and an open heart.